All right, without further ado, thank you so much to all of you for being here for what is our second webinar for the County Energy Resilience Grant Program. My name is Hannah Satine, and I am the County Energy Resilience Program Coordinator. And my co-presenter today is Maxwell Woods, and I'm going to let Max introduce himself.
Well, thanks, Hannah. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Max Woods. I am an assistant director at the Oregon Department of Energy and responsible for nuclear safety and energy security and emergency preparedness related to energy issues and the county grant program that we're here to talk about. So thanks.
Yes, excellent. Yes, so we'll be talking about the County Energy Resilience Grant Program today. Before we get going, I would like to do some introductions. So we have a couple other ODO staff members on the call. Alice Weston is our Rural Energy Coordinator. You might have chatted with Alice about this program if you're in Central Oregon or other ODO opportunities, but a great connection to make. As well as Lauren Rosenstein. She's our Community Equity and Inclusion Analyst. Really happy to have these folks on the call. And either Alice or Lauren, if you could help watch the chat as we're going. I think Sarah's not with us yet, so just, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I would love to take this opportunity to see who we have in the room with us right now. So if you're comfortable, if you could drop your name and your organizational affiliation in the chat, we'd love to see who we have with us. Thanks so much. Excellent. I love seeing who's with us in the room. And also just one other ask, if you're comfortable, if you can add your organizational affiliation to your name in your Teams window or share it when you come on to ask a question. Just helpful context for us. So our presentation today will be about 25 minutes, and then we'll save slightly more than half for our question and answer session. We will hold to the hour today, but we are available. I'm available as a resource at any point for further questions and answers. We can do phone, email, chat. It all works. Let's see, I'm trying to, if you have a question while we're presenting, if you can drop that in the chat or use the raise hand function, that would be really great. Lauren will be helping manage that for us. And then if you have a more substantive question, we just ask that you hold that until till our question and answer session so we can kind of dig into the more substantive ones then. All right, so I am going to move on to our first slide and pass it over to Max.
All right. Well, thanks, Hannah. So before we kind of dive into the program details, we thought it would be helpful to give just a little background on who the Oregon Department of Energy is, who we are, what we do. This is sort of a standard slide we put in most of our presentations, just so folks understand the work that we do. We're a small state agency, about 120 FTE at this point, which makes us a pretty small on the state agency scale. And you can kind of see there our mission and what we do, all the various programs and tasks and activities that we run kind of fall under this. I won't belabor this point, but that's who we are. Hannah, why don't you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so here we have a definition, energy resilience in Oregon, sort of setting the stage, sort of the big picture thing. And so before we kind of dive in again, I thought we would maybe take a minute here to really think about the broader context of energy issues, energy resilience in the state, and kind of think about how the grant program fits into those broader issues. So just as a very starting point, the program is funded by the Oregon legislature, and the authorizing statute, which is HB 3630 from 2023 legislative session, sort of is the grounding of what this program is all about, where the funding comes from, and a lot of the details are in that piece of legislation. But one thing that's not in that legislation is a specific definition of energy resilience. So we have a good working definition that we use around ODO and in state government, and it's sort of there on the screen. But your county can certainly choose a different definition to guide your energy resilience plan development. If you choose, you can sort of use this model. You don't really even need a definition, but we think it's a good idea to come up with a starting place and sort of a guiding definition is helpful when I work on various programs and projects to make sure that we're sort of coming back to the true intention of what we're trying to do here. We also have a little cutout here about the Oregon Energy Security Plan. That's a cover page from our 2023 plan. Our agency and my division is working on a 2024 plan, the Energy Security Plan for the state. And sort of as we look at risks and threats to Oregon's energy system on our statewide plan, we look at natural hazards primarily, but there's other things too. We look at cybersecurity, physical security risks, even the COVID pandemic was an impact to energy issues in some ways. So however you look at sort of what that shock means, what that impacts to your energy system, and then how an energy system can be resilient to either maybe consider like deflecting that shock, sort of a shield, or how quickly you can bounce back and restore energy services to your communities. Sort of that's the consideration around resilience. And the plan that we hope you all jump into and take the money and put together will include a lot of that information specific for your counties. Okay, why don't we go to the next slide, Hannah? I think there's one more with even more specific definition around community energy resilience. So what does that mean? Well, kind of the same concept as energy resilience, and then just brings a community-centric idea into it. And so you can sort of see this little graphic here, and really sort of thinking about a community and government service, not being a utility, not being a private energy company, not being a private fuel company or electric provider or natural gas company. What's the role of government? Well, the role of government in many ways is to help put all the pieces together, to help focus on public service, to help communities that need help in the event of a power loss or a shortage of energy in some ways, and to try to help, as I see it, try to help the energy companies pull the pieces back together, provide service back to whether it's the state or the county or your local community. Sort of other ways to look at sort of mitigation measures for how to reduce that threat, reduce that impact, reduce the severity of it all. An example here is a microgrid, sort of a common concept in the energy planning world about how if there was a loss of grid power, the little icon there on the screen has a break between the utility grid and the example microgrid, how else power could be provided to critical facilities, typically microgrid being a small, providing power to a small either facility and you can even see from the example here, example microgrid, there's a little icon for a generator, and then maybe some energy storage, and kind of depends on where that power might come from, and then providing the service until the grid power can come back online. So anyway, those are just a little example of what a mitigation measure might look like at the local scale. I think with that sort of introduction and sort of setting the stage, Hannah, I'm going to pass it back over to you to dive into the program details.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Max. Yeah, I think that's really helpful context for some broader energy resilience work on the state scale, and then thinking about that coming down to our communities, which is an important piece of that larger work and also a complement to it. So we're going to be talking about the County Energy Resilience Grant Program. As Max said, the legislation that this program was created out of is House Bill 3630, passed in the 2023 legislative session. And this program, hopefully, as you know, provides up to $50,000 per Oregon County to develop an energy resilience plan. And really, the goal is to create that community energy resilience that Max just defined for us, making sure those critical public service facilities have energy when there is a disruption to those larger energy systems. And we're going to dive into what that looks like and means a little bit more in a moment. In terms of eligibility for this program, the program is open to all Oregon's 36 counties. The only other eligibility requirement is that a county does not have an existing energy or energy resilience plan that meets the content requirements of House Bill 3630, which we will go over in a moment. If your county is one of the counties that has an energy or energy resilience plan, most likely you're going to be able to access this program and these funds to update that plan and meet the content requirements of House Bill 3630. Just give us a shout and we can have a conversation about that together. There is no match requirement for this program, and it is a non-competitive program for counties. Our application window opened on May 22nd, 2024, and will be open through February 28th, 2025. And our program deadline is August 1st, 2025. So in terms of the plan requirements, as Matt said, the requirements for plan content are stipulated in House Bill 3630, and we're going to go over each of them just so we can really be clear about what we're talking about when we're talking about the requirements for this plan content. So the first one is that plans need to be based on and planned for short-term, medium-term, and long-term power outages. These terms in terms of what they mean, they're not defined in the statute, but our guidance for short-term is hours, medium-term is days, and long-term is weeks. You don't have to hold to that, but that does fit within the broader state approach to resiliency. And really, when we're thinking about things like Cascadia, that potential for weeks-long outages, so something to consider there. Plans need to identify and map existing energy infrastructure in the county, including transmission lines, distribution lines, substations, and energy storage systems, natural hazard risks, and communities that experience social vulnerability. And social vulnerability, if you're not familiar with this term, refers to a group or a portion of the community's level of resilience in the face of external stressors, such as energy disruptions or disasters. It's a composite measure comprised of different socioeconomic and demographic factors. So thinking about things like age, access to a vehicle, housing type, level of English proficiency, things like that, that can either increase resilience or lower it and increase vulnerability. Counties need to consult with representatives from environmental justice communities to identify and map socially vulnerable communities. Environmental justice communities are defined in Oregon statute in 4077, so not in this one. But what that definition comprises, it's a significant definition: rural communities, communities experiencing lower incomes, communities of color, tribal communities. We have the full definition in our FAQs, and we can definitely go over each of that, but just wanted to give you a sense of what that term means. So reaching out to representatives from these communities to identify and map where social vulnerability is occurring in your county. Identify potential locations for community resilience centers and communication zones that the public can access during a power outage. So as it might sound, the intention of a community resilience center is a place that members of the public can go during an energy disruption, during an emergency, likely intended to be provide services and resources for broader emergency needs, but specific to energy. You would be thinking about things like heating, cooling, air filtration, and then charging of devices, charging of mobile devices. There might be other communication tools there, ham radios, satellite phones, things of that nature. And counties need to use locations of communities that experience social vulnerabilities to prioritize where these potential locations may be. So thinking about where the communities with the most social vulnerability as priority places for some of your community resilience centers. Plans need to inventory the energy consumption needs of critical public services facilities. So you're seeing that term that is in our definition of what community energy resilience needs. It's really central to achieving it, central to these plans. And what is a critical public service facility? This is defined in House Bill 3630. It is a facility related to law enforcement, fire protection, health and medical services, sanitation services, fuel and fueling, public works and engineering, public information, and communications and emergency response. And while that might sound like a lot, if we're thinking about an emergency, those are the essential services that, to have community response happen in an emergency are really critical, and to make sure that folks stay safe. Plans need to identify critical public service facilities where the development of alternate energy generation and storage resources will meet local energy resilience needs. So the image shows some wind power and some solar power, but there are a lot of different ways that counties can approach alternate energy generation and storage resources. It could include these other renewable sources of energy. It could be backup fuel resources, generators, microgrids, battery storage, lots of combinations, and it can really be driven by your county's needs and your county's goals. Plans need to identify opportunities to coordinate and locate energy infrastructure development to align with and support critical public service facilities. Plans need to identify time schedules, priorities, and potential funding sources for developing energy resilience. And plans need to identify other actions and resources needed to implement the energy resilience plan. So you can really see, particularly in these bottom two bullets, content requirements, that these plans are pushing towards implementation. The idea is really to think through what are the community needs and then what are the ways that your county can move closer to getting these really important projects put on the ground. So thinking through time schedules, thinking through priorities and funding. And that is a really important benefit of these plans. They really do get you so much closer to being ready to take advantage of those funding opportunities and project opportunities when they arise. And so those are the plan requirements. And, you know, within that, there are quite broad. And I think there are a lot of ways that your county can shape these plans to align with and meet other similar goals, whether it's for energy or emergency management or economic development. So, you know, within meeting these plan requirements, we really encourage you to shape these plans to best meet your local community's needs and goals. And the applications are available up on our website right now. We have 2 applications, one for counties that are applying individually just for their county, and another for counties that are applying in a cohort. And I will go over what does a cohort mean and look like in this program in a moment. If you haven't checked out our applications, please do. If somebody from Odo could drop our program page in the chat right now, that would be awesome. And we'll also have it linked on another slide. But the applications are quite simple. You know, we really tried to keep them as streamlined as possible. We don't want applying to be a burden for you participating in this program. So I encourage you to check them out, simple fillable PDFs. Thanks so much, Odo team, you're the best. So you apply, you submit it to us, Odo staff will review it for completeness and eligibility. If we have any questions, we'll just reach out directly to you to go over those. And then we ask that you submit to our program email, which is shown up here on the slide. We'll use that programmatic email for formal submissions of application, performance agreement, reporting forms, things of that nature. So other program requirements. So following the application process and the performance agreement, we will do a one-time funds disbursement. Our intention is to get funds out to your county so that access to funds is not a barrier to you getting going on your planning. So we'll do that one-time funds disbursement after the performance agreement is complete. Eligible uses of funds include county staff time, hiring technical assistance providers, outreach, travel, and other costs as necessary for plan development. If you think you have some costs in other, you can reach out to us and we can go over what those eligible costs might be. We do have some interim reports during the program. The first will be in October 2024, the other in March 2025. These are brief reports, and really the intention is just to check in and say, what have you gotten done? What are your goals for the next time in the program? And are you having any challenges? Or are there any ways that we can support you, help you through those challenges? The deliverables for the program are a copy of your completed plan and a program completion form by our program deadline of August 1st, 2025. That program completion form is a self-attestation form that you've completed your plan, met all the content requirements. And then, you know, the other major component is asking, how did you use your funds? Have you used them all? Approximately how much and which categories? And if you reach August 1st and you have not completed your plan, we do have some flexibility in the program deadline and ability to have an extension until December 31st, 2025. That's laid out very clearly in our application documents and FAQs, and I'm happy to go over it in our question and answer session or another time if you have further questions about it. There are 2 other components and requirements of our program. Counties need to formally adopt their plans, go through their adoption process within their county, and they need to incorporate these plans into their natural hazard mitigation plans. These are 2 requirements that are in House Bill 3630. However, we do understand that the county adoption process is a public process and might have its own timeline, and that natural hazard mitigation planning processes happen on their own 5-year timeline with FEMA and OEM. So these requirements don't have to be complete by the August 1st, 2025 deadline. Your plan needs to be complete, your program completion form in, but if you're still working through your county adoption process or your natural hazard mitigation update isn't going to happen for several years, that's okay. You can incorporate it in the next round of revisions. So the cohort option that I mentioned, in this program, counties can decide to work together and pool their funds in a cohort. We don't have a minimum or maximum size requirement for that. It can be determined by your group of counties. Counties who are working together in a cohort need to identify a lead county. So this county is responsible for program processes and paperwork. They'll receive the funds distribution on behalf of their cohort, and they'll be responsible for upholding program requirements on behalf of the cohort. So as I said, there is a cohort specific application. Don't be intimidated by the length. It really is the same as essentially the same as the single county application. We just ask for information from each county and ask each county in the cohort to sign it. Once your cohort is moving forward to the performance agreement process, that will just be complete with that lead county and Odo. So if your counties choose to move forward in a cohort, the plan, the multi-county energy resilience plan that's produced needs to meet each of those content requirements for all the counties in the cohort. And then all the counties in the cohort need to individually adopt the plan and incorporate it into their natural hazard mitigation plan as well. So program resources. We have a plan development resources list that's up on our website. We try to really think through what might be some needs and put together some helpful resources for y'all as you move forward in this work. There's a technical assistance provider list. We reached out to these consultants, chatted with them about their areas of expertise, and they are potentially available to contract on this work. There are links and resources for meeting those mapping requirements, example plans from communities across the US and Canada. None of these plans specifically meet the HB 3630 content requirements, but they certainly provide great examples and inspiration of how other communities have approached similar work, and I think can be really helpful resources. There's a list of project funding and technical assistance opportunities, and these are really for that your plan is complete, you're reaching out to access project funds and technical assistance support for more detailed project-based planning. But we wanted to have those there for you to know, A, there's a lot of opportunity for getting these projects on the ground, and B, they could be helpful for meeting some of those content implementation content requirement of what funding sources are out there. There's some additional resources, publications that are helpful. I think we have several folks from Energy Trust on the call, and Energy Trust is another resource in the project funding and technical assistance opportunity, as well as you're going through this planning, if you have questions. Well, if Jenny's on the call, actually let Jenny share because she'll do a better job of this than me. Jenny, are you here and available to share?
Thanks, Hannah. I am here.
Put you on the spot there.
I am having trouble with my camera, so I won't. Looks like I won't be on camera. But happy to share. And yes, Energy Trust is a resource to the communities who are interested in pursuing this grant opportunity with Odo. So please do to count us in. Hannah, is there anything particular you wanted me to touch on?
Well, I guess just sort of what we chatted about last week. So things like context of, energy resilience planning that's gone on, best practices, just y'all are just such a wealth of expertise and knowledge. So just mostly flagging that for during planning. Did I speak to that correctly, Jenny?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here too. And we'll continue to update this plan development resources list. I got to get a new version up there after this webinar, as we've already had some really great updates. So that will be a living document that, as more resources come online, we'll make sure to get them up there for you. So our website is, as you might imagine, our program page is sort of our clearinghouse for all this information. One thing I haven't yet chatted about with you, or I guess I briefly mentioned, is we have a great comprehensive FAQs document. Just like our plan development resources list, I'll continue to update that as I get questions that I think other folks might have. I'm sure some of the information we'll go over in a moment will be is in there and will be on there as well. So just want to flag that for you. And as I said, our webinar recordings will be up. Our first webinar slides and recording are already up, and this one will be up shortly. So, and there's that link to our program page. Another thing to flag is that public utilities in Oregon are directed under HB 3630 to be a resource for counties. So utilities that are in your county serving customers or operating energy infrastructure are directed to help comply with information requests, provided the information is not exempt from disclosure. So just want to flag that your utilities are a resource. There's plenty of components of these planning requirements and content where they might really be helpful thinking about mapping energy infrastructure or identifying energy needs of your critical public services facilities. And there might be some really fruitful opportunities for collaboration to meet your county's needs and meet some utility needs as well. And then me, as I've mentioned, I am here coordinating this program. I'm here to be a resource for you now when you're in the program. If you have questions, if you want to know if we have an expert or I can connect you to someone that can help answer some of those questions, I'm really just here to be a resource. So I think with that, we can switch from presentation mode to question and answer. And Sarah, you're here. If you want to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Sarah Murky. I am the community navigator. So my job is to support communities, environmental justice communities, in accessing federal and state resources for energy projects. So as these plans get created and adopted, if there are certain components of that of the plan that our projects, I would be the person to step in and support you in navigating that. I also act as very much the front door to Odo. So obviously Hannah's kind of the main person for this, but if there are other programs and services that Odo provides that you are interested in learning more about, I'm happy to connect you with the right person or even answer some of those basic questions. I joke that I try to know 5% of everything, but know who knows 100%. So that's my job. And I'm also playing MC today. So I'm happy to open it up for questions and then we can go from there. It looks like there's already a few questions in here. Tamara asks, can you clarify adoption requirements? Specifically, does a plan need to be adopted as an amendment to a county comprehensive land use plan? If no, can adoption be by resolution?
Yeah, my initial response, and I'm looking at Max to get his take on what I'm going to share, but the statute doesn't say it never says it needs to be adopted as part of your comprehensive land use plan. So I think just that it goes through your formal county adoption process. So as resolution, I think would be great. Max?
Yeah, Hannah, do you have the statute specifically in front of you? I think it just says adopted as part of the natural hazard mitigation plan for the county. Is that right? Is that what it says specifically?
Counties need to adopt it via their county and incorporate it into their natural hazard mitigation
Adopt it
plan.
and incorporate. Yeah. I think the answer to the question then is however the county sees fit for formally adopting it is appropriate. And so Tamara, if it's by resolution or some other process, then I think that would be appropriate.
Absolutely. Agreed. Okay.
Thank you.
And then Tamara, yes, we do have a list of contractors. I'm going to drop that plan development resources list in the chat right now, and you'll see that the first page is that list of contractors. So
Alice has already beat you there. So
thank you, Alice. Appreciate it. And I actually will be, as I mentioned, I'll be getting an updated version because we have a couple new additional contractors. So if you know of someone great that you've worked with, or someone interested, this is a publicly open list. So they can just reach out to me and I can get them on the list. They should have expertise in the area and be potentially available to help counties. But other than that, they can go up on the list. So. And I see
Any
Karen.
other questions? Yeah, I was going to say Karen Chase is also a fantastic resource from Energy Trust, is kind of a similar front door person. Energy Trust is awesome and has a lot of different things. So she's a great resource to getting connected over there if you are not already. Yeah. Oh,
I'll
go
just
ahead.
tag on to that, yeah, we've talked about actually once counties get enrolled in the program that I can connect you with staff at Energy Trust of Oregon if you're not already connected, so that you can have that initial opportunity to know that they're a resource, and we're in great dialogue to make sure that we can help y'all with this planning. So
awesome. John, you have your hand up, and then we have a question in the chat as well. You want to come unmute?
Yeah, thanks. I figured it'd be easier to unmute and ask. This one, I think I understand the requirements from the HB 3630. There's a couple I don't entirely understand. And back on, I think it's slide 8, it says the requirement is identify critical public services facilities where the development of alternate energy generation and storage resources will meet local energy resilience needs. What does that mean? Is that are we talking microgrids, or can you maybe paraphrase that for me?
Sure.
I don't quite understand.
Yeah, that is a great question. So, I mean, the idea behind it is when the energy grid goes down, making sure that your critical public service facilities have an energy resource available to provide them with power. And that is, I think, the simplest way to phrase that. It could look like microgrids. Those are excellent. It could look like backup generators. It could look like thinking about additional fuel storage for those backup generators, thinking about your fuel points of distribution so that you can receive emergency fuel supplies. It's pretty comprehensive, and I think there's a lot of different ways that it can look based on what's available to your county, what your county wants to go forward. So in type, there's not a lot of specificity in what you have to do. The idea is just to be making a plan for how you're going to support your critical public service facilities, should they not already have those resources in place.
And maybe if I might just add one more thing, Hannah, I might look at a critical public service facility like a water treatment facility or a wastewater management facility as an example. I mean, it could be a fire station, it could be, a hospital or a health clinic. But oftentimes I think of water and wastewater facilities, and if they don't have grid power, how much energy do they need? How much electricity do they need to continually to operate to provide water, wastewater facilities and services? And then I think the phrasing simply, this is a quote out of the statute, by the way. So alternative energy generation and storage resources, you can take that for what it means. I think it's exactly what Hannah talked about. Maybe there's a backup generator that uses diesel. Then you have to think about fuel supply chains and fuel storage. Maybe there's an alternative that would have some solar and a battery facility, although that may not be sufficient for all of your needs for a major facility, but major some type of facilities. So I think it's really getting to the point where if you can identify first those critical public service facilities and then understand their energy needs, and then sort of working what options might there be available to meet that needs if grid power was down.
I would also just add as like a plug for one of our other programs, the Community Renewable Energy Program or Project Grant Program CREP. Again, one of those things that this plan can identify is those places like your your police station or your sheriff's office or whatever that might not have that backup or needs additional backup. We have a program, CREP, which is up to $100,000 for planning processes and up to $1 million for construction of renewable energy for public entities. So again, this plan would flow perfectly into a next step and a next phase of another program that we have access for. So don't feel overwhelmed if you have all these buildings that don't have backup power and they need them. We also have programs for that. The next question in the chat is from Taylor Rembowski. When does this grant gain approvals? Are they approved as they are submitted, or are they all reviewed after February of 2025?
Taylor, that's an excellent question. And yeah, I feel a little bit silly for not clarifying that up front. So we'll be reviewing applications as they come in. So not waiting till February 2025. It should be a pretty quick turnaround to look over that application, make sure that that's all filled out, that we don't have any questions. And then from there, we'll move into the performance agreement process, provided that it's all good to go. So yeah.
Perfect. And then the next question in the chat is from Scott. Your discussion of plan requirements suggested that a plan must address a whole lot of things: power outages, energy infrastructure, resilience hubs, energy consumption, etc. Must all those things be addressed, or are those options for plan contents?
Yeah, Scott, I don't know if you're comfortable coming on to clarify, because I think I'm a little bit unsure, because I'm sure in going over the plan requirements, I also mentioned a lot of examples of what that could look like. But I guess I'll just say all those bullet points on these slides, like the one that's still up, are the plan content requirements. And we do have the statute linked with that. It is laid out in the applications, but if you do want to hop off mute and clarify to make sure I'm answering your question, that'd be great.
Yeah, my understanding, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, my understanding from looking at your resource page was that a plan could address a whole bunch of different things. Doesn't have to address all of those things that you talked about. It could go down when it, about fuel, it could go down a power thing, it could go down a critical facility thing. But the way you were presenting the plan requirements, it sounded like all of those different components needed to be included in your plan. So
Yeah,
just,
yeah. So all of these, I don't really want to make you look through that and get set going through all those bullets, but all those plan requirements that we went over, those do all need to be addressed to some extent within your plan. However, the exact specifics of what that looks like in terms of which alternate energy generation or storage resources, that's where it can be county driven in terms of thinking about how you are going to put that on the ground, or, this one, opportunities to coordinate and locate energy infrastructure development to align with and support critical public services facility. What that energy infrastructure is and those opportunities are, again, county driven, but your plan does need to be meeting those mapping requirements, looking at the energy inventory needs of your critical public service facilities, if you're getting what I'm trying to say. So within that, we understand there's $50,000, there's capacity constraints for some of our counties that, there might be a lot of critical public service facilities in that definition. And I think we get that. You do need to meet all those requirements to some extent. If that means you're going to dive into further depth on your top priority critical public service facilities, and you can acknowledge your prioritization and why, I think that is fine. But you should be meeting all those requirements to some extent, if that is clear.
Yeah, I guess it's clear, but it still, for me, it compounds the planning process in terms of all the things you have to address. Let me give you a couple examples. We created an emergency fuel plan several years ago. It needs to be further developed, and it needs particularly to focus on fuel planning points of distribution and what that looks like. But that wouldn't talk anything about power outages. It wouldn't talk about resilience hubs necessarily. It wouldn't address other things that it sounds like have to be in the plan. Another example, DOE many years ago, 2010, I think was the last time, asked us to create a list of all the backup generators at critical facilities in our counties, and that list hasn't been updated really since 2010, 2014, I think, somewhere in that time frame. And this grant could be an opportunity for us to go back and update that and connect it perhaps to some elements of what you just described. But again, it may not talk about resilience hubs or power outages or mapping the energy electrical infrastructure. So that's where I'm confused about, how would we do some of those other projects, updating things, and still address all this other stuff? So.
Yeah. So I think that, I guess, in terms of the confusion, your inclination to think that you do need to address those other components is true. So, if you decided that you were going to look at all your critical public service facilities and you wanted to support them all with backup energy generation and really think through getting fuel storage and fuel distribution as your approach, that would be great, but you would still need to think about community resilience centers and mapping your energy infrastructure to meet the requirements of this plan.
Okay.
So yeah, so I think that is the answer.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just as a note, Tamara, yes, we are putting the slides on the project page, which is put in the chat a couple of times. And the slides from the last webinar are up, and they have not changed that often. So if you want to pull those up right now, it's a good option. There's a hand raised from Holly. Holly, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. I guess my biggest concern on this is the requirements and the money allocation. $50,000 in my experience would not even come close to covering the requirements for this. So I'm just really curious how others or brainstorm on leveraging, does the technical assistance, does that count against the $50,000? Is it included in it? Like, what's the matrix to actually make this work? I would imagine the majority of counties don't have a person who does energy resiliency. So there's not an entity within my county that's like, oh yeah, this makes sense. I would have no idea how to write scope of work or even, start this project, and then $50,000 to bring on a consultant to run it for me completely is not even close to that. So how do we leverage the funding and or all of the things that have to get done when this is kind of outside of normal scope of work currently?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot in there, I would say. One option that I know some counties are exploring to make those funds go a little bit further is the cohort option, and pooling their funds to hire a technical assistance provider. Yes, a technical assistance provider would be that would be coming out of that $50,000. That is the intention of those funds, is to pay for county staff time or technical assistance provider or both. And, we are keeping our eyes and ears open for potential matching fund opportunities for the actual planning work. That will certainly be something that I will flag and share out if some come through the door that I learn about. And, in terms of like where to start, how to draft that scope of work, perhaps that's something where, you submit your application, I connect you with the staff at Energy Trust, and they might be able to talk you through a little bit more of what that looks like. I understand this can be a big learning curve, and I think it is, is a technical field. So we would just do our best to support you in getting those questions answered and helping you feel comfortable to move forward with that planning work.
I think that's part of the issue, though, is I'm going to be requesting information or requesting money to do a plan that I don't even know if I can do, right? So I think that's part of the concern is not, in order to take this to my board for money and contracting, I'm telling them that I can implement this plan, and then that I would have any general fund or out of my budget to be able to support whatever components to meet the requirements. And I can't say that right now. I couldn't go and apply for the funding to verify to them that with the $50,000 and even any of my time that I was not going to charge against the grant just to manage it, I right now cannot meet the requirements of that plan with the $50,000 and be able to say that confidently to accept the money to then start drawing down on technical assistance, and then go that far and then find out, well, actually, we don't have the ability, the time. I think Greg put in about trying to finish before August, because even if I started now, I only have a few months before fire season again for us down here. So I just have concerns about, like, I don't want to waste opportunity for quote unquote free money, because I think these are plans needed for sure, but it's just nearly impossible, I feel, with maybe exception of a few counties. So I just have a lot of concern on that front. And while the cohort idea sounds great, we're also now going to ask a lead county to take on a fiscal responsibility for other counties to be able to implement the plan and adopt it. And now I'm going to be held responsible, quote unquote, as the contracting entity to take those monies and make sure that the plan is implemented in the other cohort counties. So that's another difficult component. when you're talking about funds. Has there been
Yeah.
any applications submitted by counties at this point?
No, not yet, but we do know that there is interest, and several counties, particularly in cohorts, have expressed interest in moving forward. We have a long application window, so I don't think it creates a ton of pressure to get it in the door immediately, which is okay. However, the sooner applications come in, the longer that planning window is. I hear your concerns. I think they are valid. It's valid to be concerned about making sure that you can deliver on what you're moving ahead on. I get that. And we are working with what we are given and doing our best. We will have an opportunity to provide feedback to the legislature, make suggestions for the future. I really hope that as many counties as possible can take advantage of this opportunity. And there is an opportunity for us to provide feedback on this important planning and make potentially some changes for the future. In terms of Greg's flag in the comments about August 2025, there is some flexibility in the deadline. As I mentioned, there is a potential to extend until December 31st, 2025. Even at that point, we have created what we call the good faith clause, which is if you reach December 31st, 2025 and your plan is not complete, if you can demonstrate that you put in good faith effort to complete the plan in the time provided, meet those requirements, and you just, for various reasons haven't been able to, we're not going to revoke the funds. We'll say, please continue forward, continue with your planning. So our intention really is to be a good partner to counties. We understand constraints. We just really want to get some great planning done on the work. And as you said, Holly, it is really important. So.
We have a few hands raised and then also a question in the chat. So I think that we're gonna go in order. So Sylvia and then Greg and then Melinda. Sylvia, do you want to come off mute?
Sure, thank you. I have two very short questions, so I hope you'll forgive me for having two. But my first question is it the August, December, are these August and December deadlines statutory, or do you have flexibility on that? Because, I hear, I don't remember, back there's a couple of commenters who have expressed concerns with being able to pull that in a year, even a year and a half might be tight. And so to the extent that you have flexibility, and again, I don't know if it's in statute that it needs to be by August or December, or if this is a programmatic decision. So that's my first question. And the second is, the statute calls on the utilities to cooperate with us on information. In your conversations with the utilities, have they identified wanting to go to like one point of contact for requests related to this program? Or do we just go through our usual channels that we have as local governments? Thank you.
Great questions. I'm going to answer your first question. I'm also going to look to Max for his response as well. So it's a little bit of both. This program sunsets in statute January 2nd, 2026. So it is a limited duration program. Within that, there are some programmatic choices around the specificity of those deadlines. But that is why we have that extension, because we also have concerns about the timeline being a barrier, and it's a program rolled out for the 2-year biennium. So a little bit of both. As I said, we have that good faith clause. We really are trying to be cognizant of the fact that there is some pressure around that timeline. And, we have our due diligence to the legislature and to the statute and to the program that we need to do on our end as well. And then in terms of the utilities, we have done some outreach to our consumer-owned utilities through utility organizations, but not directly to each utility, trying to lift some of the burden in terms of outreach on their end. So I would suggest that you go directly to your point of contact. However, if you have questions, you can direct them to me. I can also connect you with staff at Energy Trust potentially to think about who the best contact might be if you don't, if you have concerns about going to your normal contact or wondering if there might be someone that's a better fit. So happy to talk through that one-on-one as well. And Max,
And
sorry, I
maybe
didn't leave
I
the
would-
phone there for you.
No, that's okay. That's all good. I agree with what you said, Hannah. I would use your regular contacts with your utility companies, which is probably more straightforward for electric or natural gas. For fuels, you may have to talk, if you don't already know, you may have to go talk to I don't know, maybe your public works departments or whoever is the buyer of fuels for your fleet vehicles or something like that, that might be able to connect you with your fuel provider. And, for the bigger counties, it might be multiple companies that provide fuel. So that might just be something to navigate through. If you do run into, the second one Hannah said, if you really aren't sure who to contact, let us know and we'll see what we can do. Odo has relationships with just about every energy company in the state and can probably help make some connections.
Okay, thank you. Greg, please feel free to unmute. And then I'm also recognizing we have 8 minutes left and there is 2 questions now in the chat.
Great. So I fully get where this whole program is coming from and where what the intent is. I'm just wondering, for example, I'm in Marion County and we are just getting a contractor on board from our 2023 June 2023 grant funding point. Because it does take that long. It took that long for us to go out to find a contractor, to get it all approved, to get it through our process, to get approval to even apply for that funding. And then to do the work, I mean, our period of performance is almost 2 years for that. And we just put essentially $85,000 towards getting 4 really small cities EOPs just updated by a contractor. And that is like the city of Detroit, which has 180 residents, right? I mean, it is small, So thinking about this as a countywide coordinated plan and effort with no subject matter experts in it that are organic to the county, and just I'm just really struggling. And I get the intent to think about doing a cohort model, but even still, looking at 2 counties in the Willamette Valley alone, there's a lot of power and energy infrastructure here that we would need to go through and assess. And I'm just, I'm not really seeing the feasibility in this being a successfully executed program, or just something that we can feasibly do when it comes down to it. I understand where it's coming from. I appreciate what you're doing. I truly think it's a great thing to do. I just don't honestly know if it's feasible for us to take $50,000, even though it's, free money, it's allocated to us, and just make it happen. Because it takes so long for us to get a contractor on board, get approval through our government process, actually do the planning of a countywide assessment. It's just, it's just a really complex thing that you're asking us to do, and we don't have the understanding or competence to do it.
Oh, go ahead, Max.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, Greg, we hear you, and it's good feedback. You can understand where we're coming from. We're implementing a program that's been directed to us to implement, and doing the best we can. But believe me, we understand. $50,000 doesn't go very far, especially in more populous counties, or even more like territorial large counties, even if they have fewer people. So recognizing the limitations, I fully get that. I can also say that we're making notes for ourselves, and we'll talk to the people that we talk to about limitations in the program and the pros and cons of how it's been outlined in statute.
Yeah, and
sorry, there's just 2 pretty not good questions. All questions are good questions, but there are 2 questions, and I recognize there's 4 minutes before for the webinar's off. So unless there's like a very specific thought about Greg's, I just want to make sure that we're covering everyone before we have to move on. I'm sorry, Greg.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
great.
the last thing I would just say is that, again, there's that good faith clause. So if timing is an issue, you've done your best effort, you've gotten the funds, and contracting has taken a long time because it does. I know there's a trust to believe that we're going to say we're not here to slap anyone on the wrist. We want to be a good partner to you. We want to help this planning get on the ground. And so if you're like, hey, this is what happened, we would say, please go forth and proceed, continue with your planning, get the work done. So that's the ethos here.
The questions in the chat, one is from Shelby. It says, is there going to be future funding directed to counties that have a resilience plan in place to implement the actions identified?
Yeah, so Sarah spoke to one opportunity, which is our CREP program. That's certainly, you know, a very natural linkage to access funds. It's available. Projects that have a resilience component, renewable energy projects that have a resilience component, receive elevated priority within that program. I would definitely check out the list of resources and opportunities in that plan development resources document. So within Odo, you know, there may be additional opportunities. There are already some additional opportunities. And whether or not this program would evolve into a specific program, I can't say, but we are trying to find those connected opportunities for you now.
I also will just add on to that is that all of the municipalities that are within your counties, if they are applying for any grant funding for specific grants, it's always great to have some sort of regional plan that they can see identified those plans, particularly for federal funding. So that is another like benefit. I mean, there's not going to be a federal program that's like, if you have this plan, then you qualify. However, you know, always having that kind of coordinated regional or county-wide effort is always really helpful in terms of applying for state or federal grants. And then, oh,
Holly, I would
go
say I
ahead.
agree with you on that. Since you're taking notes, and I know we're talking about limitation of the program, but that puts the pressure on the county to be able to manage and take on this money if we have interested cities or special jurisdictions or special interest groups that really want to do this. So then for sharing, since it has to go to the county to pull the plan together, it's just putting that resource requirement and that need on the county's lap. And so it puts us in a place of having to navigate that in our respective counties. So just trying to share that for awareness, the difficulty for us at a county level.
For sure.
Thanks for
And
that feedback.
yeah, excellent.
And then there's one more question about Melinda from Harney County says, how would we go about getting the energy map from our utilities? I just asked my power supplier about getting the map and I was told they do not give out that map for security reasons.
Yeah, so I would say questions like that, Melinda, I know we've been in touch over email, so I'll just follow up with you and we can try to have a conversation and I can talk to some folks at Odo and think about how we can help facilitate those conversations, potentially talking to our colleagues at Energy Trust of Oregon. So I think that's kind of a one-on-one conversation to figure out what that looks like. But certainly if you run into a barrier like that, we want to be a resource and do the best we can to help navigate those conversations and find avenues for you to get the information that you need. And just in terms of feedback, I also do, you know, if your county doesn't end up participating in this program, I do have in mind to reach out and get some more feedback closer to when we're going to report out to the legislature, just to make sure. I want you to know that we're hearing you and we really care about your insight and your feedback, so we can, you know, help move forward on this great work. So I guess with that, this is our final page with our contact information for the program. You have the website. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you being here and sharing. Please follow up with me if you have further questions. If there's anything I can do for assistance. Thanks to Sarah for facilitating, Max for presenting, and our other Odo staff for being here. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye, y'all.